never really was meant to be a game staff. I myself wanted to read modern languages at Cambridge. And my mother was very strict, and I knew I'd be letting her down if I didn't somehow try and make that. Well, when I got into the sixth form, my English literature was not good enough. I knew I'd got all sorts of other things on a CV, but not something that really counted. So I didn't say anything to Mother, and I was good at physical things, tennis in particular, squash, all those sort of things. And I found out in those days, in the 50s, there were two main physical education colleges, Bedford and Dartford. And Bedford gave you a Cambridge qualification. So I spoke to my mother, and she didn't seem to be too downhearted. And so that's what happened. And in my last year, we always had to do a lot of anatomy and physiology. You had to do physio, and you had to know everything about your body. Now they don't do anything like that. And when it came to the last year, I thought to myself, I had an option. In those days, I even thought of being an MP or research at the BBC. Well, I wouldn't possibly have done either of those two things now, so I thought no. And then I thought I would like to read psychiatry at Cambridge, and with already a qualification, it was going to be much easier to get in there. Anyhow, it was all pushed aside, because the head of the PE college, she called me in and she said, "Oh, Miss Vernon-Browne," she said, "I've got a job ready waiting for you, and it's in Bournemouth." Well, you know, I was Northumberland and here was Bournemouth. And what happened was that the person who was here as the head of department wanted somebody who had strong tennis. And that's how I came for an interview. It was taken out of my hands, really. I had to forget about the other things I was thinking about. And I came in 1954 when Miss Taylor was here. And there's a drawing of Miss Taylor in the central hall. You know where the portraits are. This is an elderly lady with glasses and a bun. And it was done by the head of art, and it is absolutely brilliant. She was very well respected, and she used to sometimes be at these stalls here when staff were walking along the corridor. "Oh, Miss Snodgrass, could I just let you know your seams aren't straight?" This was in the stockings. And nobody took affront. They just quickly did something like that. It was very strict when I first came here. And a lot of staff had fallen in this corridor because there was no carpet and the floor was very polished. And at least twice a term you heard a terrible crash. And I remember staff was carrying a lot of books and things and fell down. I fell once coming round to go out, and it was really hard on my hip. My left foot just slipped like that and I went crash. But then they put a carpet, and it was also the time, for the first time ever, the head of biology, when it got hot in the summer, she took her stockings off. Did we have tights then? Well, she took them off and she had sandals on and bare feet and toes. And we had a staff meeting about it. And various people said, "I think this is far too much." And the men all had to wear ties, but I think they were allowed to take their ties off if it was really hot. And we haven't had too many hot days since. I've met girls all over the world. I was in Hong Kong once, and I was having my breakfast in the hotel lobby, as everybody has to do, and a little girl from number 3 came. I didn't see her. She came and tapped me on the shoulder. "Hello, Miss Vernon-Browne," she said. And I said, "What on earth are you doing here?" "Oh, I live here," she said. And I said, well, what does Daddy do?" "He's got a king prawn farm." And this girl had only just arrived at Talbot Heath, and she was enjoying her boarding school days, and she was just as, I don't think she ever expected to see a member of staff from Talbot Heath, but this has happened quite often. And when I first came to Talbot Heath, there was a boarder called Lalisar from the Channel Islands, and my brother was at Fettes, and her brother was at Fettes. And the other thing was, I discovered that my brother's housemaster's wife in Edinburgh was an old girl from here. And so, although I was living in Northumberland, there were some things that I discovered afterwards. I would have liked the whole school to be boarding. If I was going to come to a school, that's what I wanted to do. But there were some students at Bedford, and I said, well, what's the school like? And they told me they always had a lecture on a Friday afternoon. Some outside person, the whole of the main school went into the hall and had a lecture every Friday, and by the time I arrived it was sort of about 4 times a term. But I appreciated that, but that went. The main thing was the bazaar when I first arrived. But of course I didn't have to wear stockings or tights, because when I first came I had to go out in the winter with shorts and knee socks. And the head of the department, when I first came, I said to her that at Bedford we had started to wear tracksuits, and she said, "Oh, I'm not having that." Well, she used to get chapped legs between the knee socks and the end of the shorts. And I said, well, that's what's come in now, and if you really think about it, if you're out all afternoon, it's not very nice. And by the end of the term, she had decided if this is what was happening now, she went and got some trousers specially made. So the rest of the staff, there were 3 staff then, and a lot of ancillary ones, they were allowed to wear tracksuits. And then eventually tracksuits came in for the girls, because it would be freezing outside. We had to walk to the playing field, and they were just having, say, 40 minutes, and we were there from sort of 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock. So that was appreciated. But I think that if you've got a department, especially in physical education, you've got to always have somebody who's come straight from college, so they do the latest things. The head of the department might have been there for 30 years, and she's got to keep herself up to date. And then the others, there were 4 in my time, and the rest, each member of staff had to be responsible for about 3 sports. And one of those sports had to be something they were really good at. And therefore the girls got better. But Wimbledon, when I first came, we were playing, the first team here in tennis were playing Sherborne's second team. And I thought this was disgusting. And I was not prepared for this to happen. And my roommate at college, she'd gone to Sherborne. So I think in 3 years, after the first 2 years, we didn't win the first year, we won the second year, and then the third year they decided they would send their first team. And now if we play them, we would beat them 6-love. And of course now there's an academy with tennis. But from the point of view of girls going to Wimbledon, every year, and I brought this in, there was a party went on a bus, and it was partly lower six for a social thing. So it was voluntary, and it was just put to them, I put up a list, this is a social thing, you may or may not be interested, and about 3/4 signed. And I filled the coach up with team people. So if you were really good in the lower school, I remember taking 2 lower 3s once and 1 form 2. 2 form 2s if they were really good. So some girls went every year. So I always had new people to show round. But that doesn't happen now because you can't get the tickets.
No.
And occasionally tickets are sent from the Lawn Tennis Association, and so a minibus goes to Wimbledon with maybe whatever the head of department decides she'll do. So they don't go to Wimbledon. And also the school team was always in something called the Aberdare Cup. And this was to find out who was the best school for tennis in the country. And when I came here, they were playing, it started in 1942, and I, at my own school, was responsible for playing in the Aberdare Cup, and that was the big thing as far as I was concerned. And we had a really good patch. Millfield were offering scholarships. So Millfield beat us, and Millfield tried to poach some of our girls. Only 2, I'm glad to say, decided to go to Millfield. But they regularly came, and they wrote letters to the parents, we've seen your girl playing tennis in Bournemouth or something, and we'd like to offer a scholarship, which was really a bit naughty, but they were the top school, and nobody else was giving tennis scholarships then. And it's interesting that here we are now, they're giving tennis scholarships here.